In this video we'll be learning on how to run a simple Spring Boot application on an EC2 instance. So let's get started. So before we dive into the nitty-gritty details, let's get a high-level overview of what Amazon EC2 service is. So EC2 is one of the most popular AWS offering. It's also one of the oldest as well. So it's basically a computer on cloud. Here we will be configuring the system according to our needs, and Amazon takes the responsibility to keep it available and maintain the hardware. So the primary advantages of EC2 are it is scalable, it's available, and it's also distributed. It's easily compatible with other services of AWS, and that's one of the biggest advantage of EC2. It is also easy to set up and very easy to terminate. So with that in mind, let's see what we'll be doing in this particular video. So first we'll be logging into the Amazon console, and then we'll be creating an EC2 instance. After that, we'll come back to our system and create a simple Spring Boot application. So we'll be creating a REST API with just a single GET endpoint. So after we finish our application, we'll be creating a jar of the application and copying the jar onto Amazon EC2. So once that is completed, we'll deploy the jar on Amazon EC2 and we'll get the web API up and running on the EC2 instance. By doing this, anyone with an internet connection would be able to access our API by making that GET call. So let's see how we do this particular operation. Welcome. So as part of step 1, we'll first be creating an EC2 instance. So in order to create an EC2 instance, you have to first log into the AWS account. So I have logged in, and once you log in, you go to the AWS management console, and the page just looks like this. So in order to create an EC2 instance, you have to go to services, and under compute you can find EC2. But you can also use this text box and type EC2, and then you can find it. The first option that you get is the one where we have to go. So once we click on EC2, we get a dashboard something like this. So the dashboard has a lot of metrics in it. It usually tells you like how many instances are running, like how many elastic IPs we have, and other stuff. So as we see, we do not have any running instances. So let's first create a new instance by clicking on this launch instance button here. So as soon as we click the launch instance button, we go to this particular page. So here you have a lot of choices for choosing the operating system that we need. So based on your comfort level, you can choose the operating system you want. There are some operating systems that are free tier eligible and some are not. So for this demonstration, I would be using the Ubuntu server 18.4 LTS. So this is free tier eligible, so I don't have to pay any additional money for it. So once you select the operating system or AMI, we have an option to choose the compute capacity of the instance that we want to configure. So I'll be going with the T2.micro, which is free tier eligible, but based on the kind of application that you would be running on your EC2 instance, you can go for the bigger ones. So higher the computational capacity, higher is the cost. So let's just choose this and go to configure instance details. So there's a page where you get a lot of options to configure, but this has to be configured on a need-to basis based on what you're doing. For this video, where we are deploying a simple REST API application, we don't need to change anything here. So let's go to the storage. So we'll go with the default values for the storage as well, as we do not have any need for a higher storage capacity instance. So here you can add some metadata to your instance. So if you click on add tag, you can add a key and a value to it. So we do not have a need to add any metadata. So let's go to configure security group. So security group, so this particular page is important because a security group acts as a virtual firewall for your EC2 instances. So here we can control the traffic that comes into your EC2 instance and goes outside of your EC2 instance. As of now, we can see that SSH is enabled by default. So with SSH, we would be able to gain access of the EC2 instance and run our applications there. So this is mandatory. But if you are running an application on a particular port, then you need to enable that particular port by choosing add rule. And if you are installing MySQL or an Oracle RDS on your EC2 instance, then you have to choose that, and then this port would be free for anyone outside the network to access the database running on the instance. So as of now, we'll not enable any other port, but later on, once we deploy the application that we are intending to do, we would need to free port 8080, but let's do that later. Doing later enables us to understand what we are doing. This might be confusing as of now, but later on we'll get a clear picture of what we are doing. So let's just go to review and launch. So there's a page where you can review the configuration that we have made. So everything looks good. So let's launch it. So there's a page wherein it gives you an option whether to choose an existing key pair or to create a new key pair. So if you are creating an instance for the first time, then you would probably have to create a new key pair. So a key pair, as it states here, a key pair enables us to securely connect to the EC2 instance using an SSH client. So we would be downloading a private key file. So that is very much required in order to gain access to the EC2 instance. So let's create a new key pair and we'll name it Ubuntu, and let's download the key pair. So as we can see, a file called ubuntu.pem has been downloaded, and it's there in our download directory. So that's about it for creating an instance. So let's launch the instance. It usually takes a minute to a couple of minutes in order for the instance to be up and running. So in the meantime, let's go to the downloads directory and copy this PEM file into the AWS directory I've created on the desktop. So I want everything to be at one place so that I can easily access it. So once the instance is created, the next step would be to access the instance. So in order to access it, we'll be doing it using an SSH client. I'll go through the steps in order to do that. So as you can see that the instance is running. So now let's try to SSH into our instance. So in order to SSH into our instance, we need a terminal. So if you are a Windows user, then probably you should be using PuTTY, but it's very straightforward. So like if you're doing it for the first time and you need instructions to do that, then you can click on this instance and then click on connect. So here you get a step-by-step instruction to SSH into your instance. So let's do it. So the first step I would be doing is to go to the directory where I've stored my PEM file. So vd. So if I run the ls command, I see that the ubuntu.pem file is here. So before we even run the SSH command, let's do a chmod 400 on the PEM file. So this is actually required if we do not want our key to be publicly viewable for SSH to work. So this is an important step that we have to do, otherwise we won't be able to log in, gain access to the EC2 instance. So after we are done with that particular step, let's execute the SSH command. So ssh-i, then we need the key name, and then we need to mention the name of the EC2 instance that we are logging into. So the username would be Ubuntu, that's the default username. So here we need to provide the DNS name of our EC2 instance. So where do we get that information from? So let's close this window, and if you scroll down, you can see that you can find all the information of the instance that is currently selected. So there's like instance ID, IPv4 address, private DNS address. So the information that we need as of now to gain access to the instance is the public DNS. So we can see public DNS here and its corresponding value. Let's copy that value and paste it here. So once we click enter, it will ask whether we want to log in. Let's say yes. So there we are. We are now inside the EC2 instance. So you can see that the IP address, the DNS name is Ubuntu at whatever the IP address of the EC2 instance that we have created is. Awesome. So the next step is to create a Spring Boot application, is to create a REST API using a Spring Boot. So in order to do that, let's go to Spring Initializer. So I use Spring Initializer to just create the base of my project, but this can also be done using any IDE, but I feel that there's an easier way, and I'm more comfortable using a Spring Initializer. So as we can see, we are creating a Maven project using Java, and we are using the latest Spring Boot version, which is 2.3.1. This is a stable version, and if you're specific, then you can give specific names, but we are just doing a demo application, so I'm not really bothered about these names. You can also specify the dependencies that you need for this particular API to run, and one of the most important dependency that we would be needing is Spring Web, as we are creating a REST API application with a GET endpoint in it. So let's generate our project. As we can see, the zip of the project is in our downloads file. Let's go there. As you can see, the demos.zip has been downloaded. Let's extract it. Let's go to our IntelliJ. So this can be done on any IDE. So the most prevalent IDEs are IntelliJ and Eclipse. I am using IntelliJ, but this is a straightforward process in Eclipse as well. So import project. Downloads right here. Okay, let's import the project. So you have to choose the external model as a Maven. Let's go next, finish. Usually this does not take this much time, but there is some process that is running in the background and it's slowing my computer down. So let's close the window. As you can see, it's preparing the project. It's downloading all the dependencies. It's doing some indexing. So everything is updated and downloaded. So let's go to our project. So here we'll be creating a simple REST API application with one GET endpoint. In order to do that, I have to first create a controller class. So let's create a new Java class and let's name it as controller. let's annotate this class as a REST controller. And let's create our handler method. So this particular method would just be returning a string value. So let's annotate this with get mapping, and this, and the endpoint would be AWS. Awesome. So our controller is ready. We just have one endpoint, and that is AWS, and it's a get endpoint, and this would just be returning a string value called success. So let's run this locally. As you can see, the application is executed and it's running on port 8080. So let's go to our browser. /AWS. So as we can see, the message success, so our application is running fine. So let's go back to the Spring Boot and let's create a jar of this particular application. So now what we'll be doing is we'll be generating a jar, and then we'll be copying the jar onto our EC2 instance and then try to deploy the jar over there. So in order to create a jar, go to Maven tab and then click on lifecycle, and then you can see install. So we have to run this particular option. So once you click on there, it starts running, and then you'll see that a new folder called target has been generated. So we can find the jar in this particular directory. As of now, it's not yet generated, but it will come as soon as this operation is complete. So the build is success, and we can see our jar here. So let's go to our AWS directory where we stored our PEM file and copy this jar over there. So it's copied. So the next step would be to copy this jar onto our EC2 instance. So in order to do that, let's go let's create another tab. New window. So I've opened another terminal window, and I'll be placing it side by side. So I have two windows open. So one window has, we have SSH'd into our EC2 instance, and in the other window we will be copying the jar file from our local file system to our EC2 instance. So let's create a directory in our EC2 instance. So this is the place where we would be copying our jars to. So mkdir jars, and if you do an ls, we can see that there's a directory called jars. So here let's go to the directory where we have our jar. So cd desktop AWS, and if you run a ls command, we can see that there is a jar file and an Ubuntu PEM file. So let's use SCP. So SCP is a command, it's a short form for secure copy. So we'll do scp-i, and then we would need the key in order to transfer it to our EC2 instance. And then we would need our DNS name. So Ubuntu .com/jars. So we can see that we have written the scp-i. This is the key file, and after the key file we have to mention the file that we need to copy. So here we will put on demo. So this is the file that we will be copying, and we will be copying it to our EC2 instance in the jars folder. So once you click on enter, you can see the status of the copy, and once that is 100%, we'll do an ls here and see if the jar has been copied. So let's go to the directory called jars. We do an ls, we can see that our jar has been successfully copied. So the next step would be to run this particular jar on our EC2 instance on the cloud. So once we run this jar, and if it is successfully executed, then we can access our API from anywhere in the world. So in order to execute this particular jar, we need to execute the command called java dash as we can see, we just created this particular instance, and Java is not installed on our EC2 instance. So we need to first install Java, and then we can run our jar over there. So in order to install Java, they've already suggested few commands called sudo apt install default JRE, sudo apt install openjdk. So let's try one of this command in order to install Java. As we can see, I think the installation was not successful. If you read the message here, unable to fetch some archives, maybe run apt get update. Okay, so we need to run this particular command called apt get update, so that it downloads all the packages and information from all configured sources. So let's do it. So now we can see that we have updated our EC2 instance, all the packages there, and let's try that sudo apt install default JRE once again. We can see this time that there is something happening. I think it's installing successfully. So all it needed was update of all the files on our EC2 instance, and once that was done, we are now able to install Java. So our Java is successfully installed. So let's try to run our jar. As we can see, the jar is successfully running, and it's running on port 8080, as it was, like it's behaved exactly as it behaved in our local system. So let's go to our browser on our local computer, and we need the DNS name again. So let's go to DNS/8080/AWS. as we can see that it's not running at the moment. Like whenever the connection times out like this, when we are running something on an EC2 instance. So one thing that you have to remember is to verify if our security group is configured properly. So if you remember, when we tried to configure the security, so security group can be found here at the same place where you can find all other details of this EC2 instance. And if you remember, when we configured our EC2 instance, we just configured for port 22 so that we could SSH into our EC2 instance and run our application. But we have not configured port 8080 where our application is currently running on EC2 instance. So in order to fix this issue, we just need to go to our security group, and we can see that the inbound rule is just SSH TCP port 22. So it is the only port 22 is open on that EC2 instance. So we need to edit our inbound rules, and then we need to add a rule. So it should be custom TCP, and we have to specify the port number as 8080. So it doesn't always need to be 8080. If you configure the port there as 9000, you have to put in 9000 here. So here you can see an option called custom. So custom means you can choose which system can talk to this particular EC2 instance. So suppose if you want only your local system to talk to the EC2 instance, then you can put a custom IP address over here. But for this demonstration, I just want any computer to access that endpoint. So I'll choose anywhere. So here they have given a text box to add description, but that is not required for the time being. So let's save these rules and see if this fixed the problem for us. Let's go back and refresh. As we can see, it's a success. So that was the issue over there, that we had not configured our security group properly, on purpose, while we are creating our EC2 instance. So now we understand how security group works and how we need to configure it in order for us to access our application running on our EC2 instance. Hey guys, thank you very much for watching. If you feel that you got any value out of this video, then please click the like button, comment on what you liked, and also on what you want a video of in the future. And also subscribe to this channel for similar content. You can also get in touch with me on Instagram at @myannapixels. Until then, have a good one. Bye bye.